welcome to this fireside chat. It's an honor to be here at the RISE World Summit. And I'm with somebody who I consider an inspiration, a friend, certainly was a colleague when she was at Babson College. And you'll be hearing from Savitha Sridharan in a few minutes. But I just want to frame this fireside chat so you know where you are and what we're going to be talking about. This is really values in action. And this session is called Powering Communities, Improving Lives. And we're going to really be aligning this. Savitha and I will be having a conversation aligning it to the values of the RISE Summit. And those values, which many of you who have been at the summit all day know, are really about sustainability. I'm sorry, I know my notes are crazy here, so I apologize. Around sustainability, inclusive, eco-friendly, and responsible. And one of the things that I love about the values is that the values, as stated, are drivers of positive change and are part of every individual and organization to a varying degree. We all talk about values, but I love the way that RISE states them. And they also state that the values are in constant state of evolution, depending on experience and knowledge in personal and professional spaces. And at some stage, they are in sync with the ecosystem in which one operates and may be shared by other stakeholders. It creates the basis of a framework for collaboration and collective impact for the greater good, shaping a society and its culture. And it couldn't be a more fitting way to introduce Savitha and Aurora Global. So what I'm going to do, which I normally do after I just tell you who I am, is I'm going to ask Savitha to tell us about her journey. I'm Cheryl Kaiser. I'm with the Lewis Institute at Babson College, and I run the Babson Social Innovation Lab as well. Babson is a small school, only a business school, but it's the #1 school of entrepreneurship in the world and has been ever since rankings. And our mission is to educate entrepreneurial leaders to create economic and social value simultaneously. You'll see from Savitha, and I'm sure Babson is pretty excited, that not only is she a unique and incredible individual, but she has done exactly that. If I am to look at any alumni at Babson who has brought our values to life and are living our values, it's Savitha. And so I'm going to ask Savitha to start with just telling us a little bit about who she is by telling us what calls her to do what she does in the world today. Savitha, thank you for joining us on this fireside chat.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Karen, for having me at the conference. So a little about what caused me to start this journey is my passion and my upbringing to be a women engineer, and that's how I started this journey. And all along when I was growing up to be an engineer, all along in my journey, I noticed that there were very few women along the way, be it in the technology space or at the workplace. And all along, I had this passion to bring more opportunity to women, to see more women like me in different areas. And that's what motivated me to do something in this space. My family has been a huge inspiration in this all along. They've been asking me to be creative, start something on my own, be entrepreneurial, and that's how my doors to Babson College opened up. Babson College has been a great eye-opener for me, and it completely changed me. As a woman, as an entrepreneur, I think it allowed me to take the freedom that I had on creating anything, dreaming anything wildly, and actually bring it to reality. As much as it was an idea for a long time, it was not until I met Cheryl Kaiser and Emily Weiner that I took this to become a reality. And before I had come to Babson, I had worked with multiple communities in India, and particularly a tribal community called the Irula community, which was a victim to climate change. And the women, particularly in the community, were deeply impacted by this. So there was an urge to create something different for them, but I did not know where to start. And Babson gave me all the knowledge and the necessary resources to take this up as a reality and convert it. And that's where I started my journey.
Thank you, Savitha. So why don't you now show us a little bit about what you have created, and then I'll come back and ask some more questions. But we'd love to see the video that you have to share with us.
So presentation. So just have a presentation with a lot of pictures of our work. Aurora Global does most of its work in rural South India. And we work with women in communities where they're impacted by climate change. They live in communities where there's a terrible fear of crime, health hazard, poor quality of education, and no place to earn regularly. And this is something that I wanted to change, like I mentioned, in many of the communities. And in many of these communities, there's also no access to electricity. And what I wanted to create using Aurora Global is a very sustainable solution. And when I say sustainable, it's a little beyond triple bottom line sustainability. I wanted to build climate resilient sustainable communities, and I created this with social, environmental, financial, and last mile responsibility, sustainability. So here are some of the pictures of our women at work, women working on electronics. These are our solar plants, which we call the Aurora Power Hub, which I'll talk about in greater detail. Our Aurora Power Hubs are completely clean energy empowered. So the Aurora Power Hub set up in a manufacturing unit in India, which is in a garment manufacturing center where women manufacture products to sell off to different communities across the world. And we operate in something called as the profit sharing model, which I'll talk about in greater detail a little later. We have one location that we have picked up, but we are going to be working on multiple locations all around this place in Trichy, and we'll talk about why I do that. And we can go back to Cheryl Kaiser and her questions, and then talk about more details as we speak about it.
Thank you, Savitha. So we've known you a long time, and I remember the first time I knew about Aurora Global and what you were doing is in preparation for the Clinton Global Initiative. And you were presenting there, and you actually had the opportunity to have about a 20-minute chat with President Clinton. So I'd love you to talk, Savitha, about your original value statement, what you were trying to solve for, and what is the model? Can you share with us the model that you have created? Because it's really grown over time. But again, back to your story of self, as an engineer, as a woman engineer, you were really doing so much more than just providing solar power. It was a ripple effect to bringing women out of poverty and linking it to sustainability and further, sort of equitable commerce and gender equity. So can you talk about how you started it and how it's different today than it was when you started?
Sure. So there were two key motivations that I have been clear about right from day one. One is to provide more economic opportunity for women. I grew up in Bangalore, which is a very well-developed place in India. And still as a woman, I found a lot of challenges growing up in the cities in India. And I just felt after moving to the United States that there was so much more that of a support system that the country offers for women. And I thought that I had to give back to India and build a stronger community, at least for people living in the poorer regions. And that's what motivated me to start something to empower the lives of women in India. The safety for women in India is something that we all read about, but I wanted to create the safe space in a community for women, so that in case the families do not have their support, they have a place outside their home that they can come to in this community and use that as a model or a place where they can get sustainable in their own communities. So that's one thing that I started with. But there were also other systemic issues. Given that poverty is a very systemic issue, solving one problem doesn't solve it. So you have to create a bigger solution than just trying to give farmers agricultural resources in organic farming and things like that. Like if they don't have basic electricity, then it's very hard for them to operate pumps and do other things. So what I wanted to do is take one technology product, which is the clean energy, and create solutions around it in the rural area. So with this in mind, I was traveling India in multiple locations and trying to figure out a model when I came across this community, beautiful community in India, where all the women had gotten together, and all these women came from a background where they had an agricultural background, but because of climate crisis, they had lost their agricultural income, and they were looking for an alternate source of income within the community. And given the cultural barriers that they had, they could not travel out of the community for too long. Like they had to get out at 8 o'clock and come back home by 4 o'clock. So they couldn't get into like selling solar products and things like that. So this is where I set up the concept of a solar production center. And I taught women for 2 years who had no background in electronics whatsoever. I taught them electronics for 2 years. And now these women can produce solar products, solar street lights and other devices to light up their own community. So what we have done is we have made an energy and a women powerhouse within the community so that they can be their own changes. And I can sit remotely in the United States and still teach the women what they can do to make themselves sustainable in the community. So what the model now is completely based on sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I take it one step beyond triple bottom line sustainability. It's not just social, environmental, and a financial sustainability. I also call something called as the last mile sustainability, where you put power into the people's hands in their remote community and they become sustainable from anywhere within themselves. So I would almost term a new word for it called the quadruple sustainability. Yeah.
Well, no, but I love the last mile sustainability because it's interesting. I think that nobody addresses it the way that you just said it. I think that's a great, concept, and it's a great word. So can you give us, people really resonate with stories. Can you give us one or two iconic stories of what, some of the impact that Aurora Global has made with some of the women that you're working with, some real live stories that come to mind for you?
Yeah, the impact that we've been able to create for the women is tremendous and is at multiple levels. So if you look at the women, you can look at it at the women at a personal level. It has impacted their family, the community as a whole. So if you look at the women, they came, there's a lot of barrier for women culturally in India. And one of the things that, one of the barriers that the women had was the whole concept of using electricity or anything related to electricity. They would just think that they would just get electrocuted or they have shocks and that they're not capable of working with electricity. And that was a huge barrier for us to break, teaching them that you can actually touch electric products, you can create it and you're fine. And it's amazing how the women have changed and got the confidence to build their own solutions now. They come up with innovative ways in which real world challenges can be solved with solar solutions. So that's a huge confidence that the women have had. The women were always challenged with limited money because they have financial barriers. And when it came to a choice of sending their children to education, the boys would go to school, but the girls would they would think twice before sending the girl to school, because that's how the cultural barriers were. And now with the additional income and support that we give them, they think that women are capable of doing things, and they send their girl children to school as well. The women have united as a community, and now they're able to have a little health fund among themselves. And if there's any medical emergency, they basically work with each other and support each other among the communities. And it's great to see that the women have united so well through COVID. And I was really touched because through COVID, they reached out to World Bank, and without no interference from my side, they brought in support from World Bank to support themselves. And I thought that was a huge win, because they didn't need another entrepreneur like me to come in and help them. They had the power and the voice to go find World Bank to support them.
I think that's pretty amazing. You know, I was on a site, and I want you to talk a little bit about this, because I don't know any entrepreneur as fierce as you are in terms of being able to raise money from amazing sources. And I know people are probably wondering, how do you fund this? How did you get started? Who was some initial investment? And one of the questions that was asked to you by a potential funder was the question of, how would you answer what if? And you said, what if the sun could be used to power every house in the world and light up 1 million lives? And you have started to do that. So when you go to investors, tell me what has been the most powerful lever for seeking investment, and what's been a challenge for you as a woman to try to get this social enterprise funded?
Sure. I think, like you mentioned, the biggest challenge has been to be a women entrepreneur in the clean energy space. And the next step that I'm taking it to support a company full of other women entrepreneurs is been a huge challenge, because now we're talking about the ecosystem change. And when investors are looking for output of a unit which they invest in, they are looking for faster output. And there's just a cultural barrier around women giving results fast in the solar space. And that's a barrier that I've had to break, saying that it's possible for women to do it, and we can do this over and over again. And it's just about practicing the skill and taking it to the next level. So now with World Bank, the women led the whole effort, and they created the solar street lights on their own. And we have now gotten into a habit of producing 50 solar street lights every month for these communities. So once they start believing in themselves, the women have been able to produce faster. So as far as your question about investment is concerned, I strongly believe that there are investors out there who believe that the clean energy space cannot be male dominated and it needs to change. It has been a little bit of a wait to reach them, but I think once they buy into your mission of women empowerment, they bring their whole community along with you. One person that I want to definitely mention along this is Karthik Chandrasekhar from Sangam Ventures in India. And he has been a very big supporter of the women's movement in the clean energy space, and has brought the whole clean energy investor circle to invest in us. And I think it's that 1 or 2 people that are there that believe in women empowerment and will take this to the next level. And it's always good to wait for those investors to buy into your cause.
Yeah, absolutely. And who was your first investor? Who was the first person that believed in you?
The first person that believed in me was someone from my family network who is the current CEO of Coca-Cola in India, Mr. T. Krishna Kumar. There were a lot of Facebook posts that we were posting about Aurora Global and how Babson is helping me change lives. And his wife, who is on my social media account, followed me one day and during one of my trips to India insisted on supporting us. And it made so much of a difference that someone in your family stood up for women empowerment and truly believed not only in the cause, but also in financially supporting it and putting their name behind me. And that was a huge win for me.
Oh, that's great. So when you're a values-driven leader like you are and a values-driven entrepreneur, sometimes you're going to get pushed to do something that you might have to take on that you didn't want to, because what I mentioned in an earlier fireside chat, that social designers like yourself, social enterprising people, fall in love with the problem, which you just stated about what if, and they don't fall in love with the solution. But a lot of people fall in love with the solution. They're really excited. They think they have a solution, and they drill down in that solution when in fact things keep changing. And what I've observed about you, because we check in every once in a while, is you are always sort of reimagining and expanding. So are there times that you get challenged and the challenge moves you to another place, but you can still keep your values? Or have you ever had to challenge how strongly you stay to your values in order to get the business going? How do you manage that, sort of creative tension?
Sure. So there's the two core values that Aurora really believes in is sustainability and being inclusive, bringing more opportunity to women and youth in the community. And these are the two principles that we have operated on right from day one. So when you work in the community, I think there is several challenges in trying to, like I mentioned, there is 4 elements to sustainability. That is social sustainability, bringing livelihood opportunities for women and for youngsters. Second is the financial sustainability, that is keeping the for-profit model. I truly believe in creating a for-profit model, even in very poor regions, because that's how we can grow into a sustainable long-term solution. Then environment sustainability is solar, using solar and getting training people to provide solar even in the most remote locations. So one of the things that I get challenged about each time is sticking to this core principles of sustainability. You're tempted to say, okay, let's let the men in and not give the opportunity to women because it's easier. Sometimes you're like, the solar is not the best solution. Let's just hook it up to electricity and get it working with electricity. But that's not the point. I think the core issue is we have to think about it long term, not just about short term impacts. We have to think about it long term. And I think once you set your values in place, people start imagining an alternate reality, and that there's a possibility of an alternate reality which can be sustainable, and start making that a habit rather than, it's the habits that you help them cultivate. And what Babson has taught me is to put this reality in action. As difficult it may be, you just have to put this in action and make this a reality. Or it's about rebuilding your imagination and teaching people to believe in an alternate imaginative world and slowly make it a reality.
Yeah, this is your session is the second session where imagination has come about. And we were talking prior, because you know that we had a session with Mick Jackson in the last fireside chat from Wild Hearts, and he was telling us about a little boy who went through the program, and the little boy was surprised, and he said, you know, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how much imagination you have in your heart. And just the image of imagination in your heart is just, it's explosive. And I think of you as the adult version of how much imagination you have in your heart. And I love that you stick to that, because that is how change happens. Every time we slowly go back, you actually don't go for the change that can really leapfrog generations of people into a whole different socioeconomic place, and also level of confidence. And when you have the confidence on the values that you are living, then the people you're working with, those values get translated. And so that just really energizes them and empowers them. I absolutely love that. I love that. Emily, were you going to try to say something?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question, Savitha, sort of in that same vein. You are one that has led with your imagination in your heart, for sure. And with community being so much at the core and at the heart of everything you do, no pun intended, you know, how does this change and evolve over time as you are going into different communities? Because obviously different communities will engage and react. There are certain things that may be consistent across the globe, but I'm curious, like, what are sort of the consistencies that you're seeing as you're evolving and growing and changing over time that cut across every community maybe, and maybe what are certain things that you have changed or shifted in your own business model as a result of learning about the needs of a community and how they're going to respond to what it is that you're co-creating?
Sounds good. So I just want to show you a couple of pictures at this point of where we started. And so when we first started, we were giving out solar lanterns. And then that year in 2015, there was a huge flood in Chennai in India. And all the communities that we were working in got washed away. All the solar lanterns that we gave got washed away. And that's when we said, we have to redefine sustainability from just being a solar lantern to long-term people sustainability. And what we did was, again, with the support of T. Krishna Kumar, current president of Coca-Cola, we were able to take a village with community participation. We were able to rebuild the whole community to be long-term sustainable. So we built a solar village for 120 families in this community by taking the input of the people and redesigning the houses for them using the local sustainable material. So that is one way in which our definition of sustainability changed at the beginning. Then it's at this point that I realized that to scale into a bigger business model, to impact a lot more people, I have to come up with a scalable model. And given that my passion was to empower women and create better opportunities and livelihood opportunities for women, that's when I set up this training institute for women and decided to pay them and let the women choose how they want to spend their money. They could spend their money on better health, on better housing, things like that. So we created a sustainable center for women and gave them jobs and taught them electronic skills. Now they can produce the solar products that are required for their whole local community. And we are actually building networks across India right now to produce these products and sell it all across India. This way, we have locally made products made in India, supplied to the people within India. And if we move to another country, we want to create hubs locally in multiple communities to have local sustainability. And that's what the whole idea of this was, is to have local sustainability. So if you're looking at a village called Trichy in India, all the products, solar products made for them will be supplied by this community. So we keep getting problems from rural communities in India. A rat bit my cable, and what do I do? Can you send me an engineer from Bangalore? Now that's not needed anymore because the local women can fix it themselves. So we have created an ecosystem locally itself as we move on. The next step we are doing with taking sustainability to the next level is we have been able to create all the training material that is required for these women in an AI tool in partnership with a Stanford-based company. What we are doing is all the production material that are required to produce these solar products are updated online. Now, all that the women have to do is get on their smartphones, and step to step will be given instruction on how to produce a product or how to go through a particular process in sustainability. So now, I've also noticed that it's way more easier to reach women digitally than going in person to reach. So putting this whole solution up on the digital network has made it easier for me to find ecosystems around the world where women want to change themselves, and I can transform the community slowly in a period of 3 months by giving them very clear instructions on how they can take it to the next steps. So over COVID, this is an improvement that has happened, but I don't think our change or our innovation can stop, because as we keep going into other communities, we keep learning so many things about local practices of women and their cultural barriers. So I'm sure we're going to redefine 1,000,000 times more before we reach many more women. And I think the basic principles of sustainability are the same, but you have to co-design a solution for the community that you're working with. I mean, an off-the-shelf solution is not going to work. You just have to understand the local people, the local industry there, what are the local talent, cultural barrier, and co-design the solution for them. So that's why it's easier or much better to work with an organization like UNICEF or a larger organization which creates impact in multiple organizations, in multiple places, because once you put the sustainability elements in place, the whole organization will create the change and we can touch a lot more people. So that's the way we are moving forward.
That's just incredibly powerful. And when you're talking, I get overwhelmed because you're putting, and I can imagine this is, the dilemma you talk about with investors who are not as patient as some are, and patient capital is important. And what you're doing is you are creating sustainable change. You won't have to look backwards. Organizations like UNICEF or any of the large intermediaries, by working with you, you actually have a strategy for social change by being able to do it through educating women. The question I have for you is that's on educating them on the technical aspect. How much education and direction do you have to give? Because you're working with a social system, right? You're working in a community. What are the things that go well, and I absolutely agree that you only can co-create solutions with people who actually are living in the problem set. But what are the people challenges when you have the curriculum and everything in place? What then are the challenges that go wrong, and what actually can you do about it from a distance?
So I think the biggest challenge that I have seen is, I think the first barrier that I face is trust. One is the barrier that people don't trust in themselves first, because I think extreme poor or poverty-ridden areas have a lot of challenges. And we talk from an alternate world, but don't see a lot of people getting that picture. And that's the biggest barrier I'm having to break most of the time, to get a buy-in from the community and to make them believe that there's an alternate possibility and things like that. That's the biggest challenge that I have. And that's why it's necessary to work with trusted partners or take an existing ecosystem in place and work with the partner to create it with them. Like we worked with a particular NGO called Seva in India, and now this nonprofit touches 150,000 women in that area. So it's important to find ecosystems like this, which are already trusted systems around the place, and teach them the value of sustainability and what long-term sustainability is. So it's almost like a sustainability education that needs to be given at a more higher level, because I think people are just become victim to their habits, and it's important to change that. It's the hard route to take it. It's hard to get women to believe in themselves and get out and work and learn a skill, but it needs to change. Until we create that alternate reality or paint a good picture of the alternate reality and make people believe in it. First, I think it's about people believing in themselves before it's people that have to believe in themselves that there is an alternate reality and you can make it happen. Yeah.
So do you spend a lot of time up front having community conversations with people way before you get them to the point of agreeing to, you know, create an ecosystem? And what kinds of conversations and I don't mean strategy, what kinds of ways do you build that trust yourself or with those people that you're working with, so that they can imagine a better future in such dire poverty?
Sure. So what we do is the first thing, the way you build trust with people is to first understand where they are coming from, what are the challenges that they face, and what are the barriers that they face. Like, for example, women did not believe in electricity. Women did not believe in earning. Like when I first started in this place, they did not believe that women could earn, right? So you had to teach them that it's okay for you to demand that you earn. It's okay for you to be financially free. It's okay for women to make decisions in the house. It's okay for women to make decisions in the community. So it's that kind of trust that you have to build with the community and the strategic partners that we work with. And it requires about 2 to 3 months of a good discussion, trying to understand them and understanding their picture, and slowly creating a change for a longer term. So what we do is we have a 3-month training program of sorts, where we slowly walk the community, the strategic partner that we work with, from their current state to an alternate reality of sort. It's like a 3-month process where we first teach the partner, or we pick a trainer from that community and we train the partner on how sustainability can be achieved. And usually this partner or this trainer is someone from their own community. And once one of their own people buy into it, it's so much more easier to transform. So we have like a train the trainer program where we build a sustainability consultant among them, and they go out and rebuild the community among themselves.
So you've done amazing stuff, and I encourage anybody that's going to be looking at this fireside chat to go to Aurora Global's website, because what you've accomplished, Savitha, is incredible. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One is, what's next? What is your next big challenge? And if you could ask anything of any of us, because we believe in our ability to gift to you, because to me, people who are trying to set something in motion and solve social dilemmas that are around the world, and somebody like yourself, It's about letting people know what you need. So what is your next big challenge and what do you need? As an entrepreneur, what do you need?
I think one of the biggest challenge that I have right now is reaching out to more women in India. I mean, given that I'm physically located here, one of the things that I'm trying to do is I truly believe in changing this for emerging markets and India specifically because it's been home. One of the biggest challenges I have is reaching more women and helping them become part of our mission. So the best gift I can get from a network like this is that community of women that are looking to change their lives and are looking to take our principles of sustainability to a longer term within their village. And I see a lot of organization in a network like this that Karen has created. And I think through these connections, I will be able to take this model to different parts of India and be able to change it for many more women in India. And that's the biggest gift I can get from a network like this.
Terrific. So Karen, this is the first time you've spent time learning about Savitha. Do you have any questions for Savitha and her model? Just curious.
So firstly, congratulations, Savitha. I mean, simply amazing. And of course, I expect no less from Sharon. but at the same time, it's always so beautiful to see, the result of that kind of brilliance that you expect from a person like Sharon. But so thank you very much for being a part of this, summit. And I think a lot of what you said, I believe will going to be inspiration to a lot more other women to follow in your footsteps, to understand that social entrepreneurship can be a viable model. Because I think, one of the statements that you said right from the beginning, that I want this to be a business model. I want this to be sustainable. I want this to be long-term. And very often when we look at social issues and we look at entrepreneurship, we look at solutions and interventions, we tend to feel that the only way is the philanthropic manner, and so it does put an additional pressure when you say that I want to make a sustainable model out of it. It's not about right or wrong or good or bad, but I think it's more about realizing that they both are very different and there are different needs around it. So I congratulate you on your decision to look at the social entrepreneurship. I'm going to ask one question for sure. Yeah. Programs like these are not easy to scale up, right? And you did mention that, you've had some great partnership, etc. So what would be the biggest challenge you see, in spite of having the network, in spite of having the partners, but on ground, from an on-ground perspective, because many entrepreneurs do get into programs and initiatives that they believe very passionately in, but they always get challenged and somewhere kind of, hit a wall when you look at scaling. So if you could maybe talk a little on that, would be simply amazing.
Sure. Great question. So, so the biggest challenge that I have faced so far is finding communities that that believe in a for-profit model. I think it's one community that, like, for example, this community that I work with had the skill in tailoring as well. So what we did is there's a US company called Wrapped, which makes these kind of, gift wraps. And it's, instead of using paper packaging, United States is trying, a lot of people in the US are trying to move to fabric-based gift wraps. And these women are going to produce it and do it. And that's their way of revenue, and that's the for-profit model. So the biggest challenge I have is to understand the local community's skill and their strength, right? So a lot of communities have skill and strength in some way, but they are not talked about, or it's hard to access them, or there are no social platforms where people talk about it, and women are silenced in a lot of places and they cannot talk about their skills because they don't want too much publicity and things like that. A lot of cultural barriers. And that's the barrier I think I'm going to have to break. Like, people have strength, people have skills, but I think it's that believing in themselves and the skills that they have and bringing that to the, I mean, first I need to hear of them so that I can go reach out and do more. But also about, it's a process. It's not a one day. Rome was not built in a day. Yes, it's a process. It has to change. But I think that's the barrier that it's important to believe. Like, you take people's strength, and it could be anything in any industry, and it can be sustainable. Sustainability is not any particular place. I think sustainability is a lifestyle that you have to adopt, and it's getting people to believe in this alternate reality is the biggest challenge. It could be in any area. It could be stitching, it could be solar, it could be making bamboo brushes, it could be anything, but it's possible. And I think every country, in every place in India has its own strength. And that's the beauty about India. There's no one model that can fit in every place in India. Every 10 miles is different, right? Yeah. So
Thank you.
So I'll just end with, I'm going to ask you to end, Savitha, but I just want to emphasize what you both have mentioned, and that is, so many times when people want to solve a problem, they automatically think of setting up a not-for-profit. They don't believe that these goals behind me, the UN Global Goals, are going to be solved unless I set up a not-for-profit to solve this social issue. This is a $17 trillion market opportunity, solving the UN Global Goals. Savitha, you know that. You know that in clean tech, you know that in the world of solar. That that for me, and I feel the same way you do, if sustainability is also about the freedom to be able to create your way forward with resources that are not just constrained in one sector. The philanthropic sector is one sector, and that's even changing in terms of what they're investing in. But I think that when you lock yourself in to a business model that is tied to philanthropy, it's very hard to see sustainability moving forward, because your future is dependent upon a philanthropic model, not a free market model, not a model where resources can come from lots of different places. So I love that you're a for-profit model, Savitha, because you really are an example for Babson students when they think they have to make a trade-off between a for-profit or not-for-profit. I always cite what you do, because that is the best sustainable model whereby you can grow it, and grow it in lots of different ways. So I'd love you to end with, just an insight for people who will be listening to this around what you've learned since you started this in 2014.
I think I've learned to have fun working with people. That's what I like most about it. I get to be with people every day, really interesting people, and redefine the world. I'm redefining and building the world that I want to live in every day. And I think that's what I want to see. I would like to see more entrepreneurs, particularly more women entrepreneurs, believe in themselves and do more, not only along sustainability, but about encouraging more of women in their network to just live life and have fun building a better world here.
Thank you. Well, we are so grateful to you. Thank you for being at the Rise World Summit. It's been an honor to be with you on this platform, and I look forward to many, many more platforms as you grow. And I would just wish you all good fortune, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity, Karen.
Most welcome, and thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Right.
Savitha and Annie, before you both hang up, I wanted you two to meet each other today. So I was so happy that Annie was able to join us, because I just have to say, Savitha, you are extraordinary. We do talk about you all the time. And Annie is one of our extraordinary current MBAs who will be graduating in May, and works with a collaborative of women and is very passionate about gender equity as well. And I knew that she needed to learn from the best entrepreneur out there. So I really wanted to make sure that I at least got the chance for the two of you to put face to name, and I'm happy to connect you by email and all of that. But Annie, I don't know if you had any questions. I know you wanted to jump in here too, and you can unmute. You don't have to.
Hi, it's
Happy
really
to.
nice to meet you. Yeah,
Hi, Annie. Happy to get on a call with you and chat some more anytime. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Savitha, just a quick question. Where are you right now physically?
I'm physically in North Carolina in United States.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I can teach women electronics, sitting rurally, sitting here, and teach rural women in India. And it's fascinating to be able to do this.
Awesome.
And yeah, I wish I could reach more women, or I will find a way to reach more women in India to make this change.
Definitely. I'm sure we'll be able to do a lot more. But I was just for a minute wondering, because it is, 4:30 in the morning over here. So for a minute I was like, oh my gosh, I have to check that one out.
She doesn't sound like it's 4:30 in the morning. She's like, Karen's like,
I think you're just always, you are an energizer.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Great. Thank you so much. So we'll stop this session now, Cheryl, and then
And we'll go into the next.
into the
We'll
next.
see you at the next session.